what we are seeing at the moment, we have a switch from public to private, and I think this is also the wrong solution.
When we talk about autonomous mobility, for example, which has obviously its advantages despite some technological challenges, people are always very worried about cyber attacks. What happens if someone takes control of all these nice robo-shuttles I have now described, or if someone takes control of Shann's robo-shuttles in Singapore? What can we do to avoid this? What is your agency doing? Where do you see the path forward?
Yes, thank you very much. And I just want to give you a few thoughts what the Federal Authority for Cybersecurity in Germany is doing on the topic of smart cities and especially on smart mobility. When we talk about smart mobility, we have a quite complex system. So we have a lot of sensors involved, we have a lot of interaction involved. We have also emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, but also complex networks, network security, and so on. So therefore, easily these systems can be hacked, and therefore we have to do the right measures to protect the systems from cyber attacks. If we just look what just happened in Anhalt-Bitterfeld, where we had really one of these cyber attacks and by ransomware just a few weeks ago, where basically due to a server attack the system went down for more than 2 weeks. This is definitely something we need to avoid, and we need to build also the trust for our citizens to really rely on these systems. So therefore, from the BSI perspective, we need to think cybersecurity from the beginning, cybersecurity by design, to ensure to have the right systems in place. Basically, what we are doing are a lot of things. So we have a lot of certification schemes where we ensure that the critical parts have the right security measures involved. We do a lot of technical directives to move on here. Just recently today, we give the first report on the situation on cybersecurity for automotive. We published this, so therefore please look also in the web to see what's going on there. And we do a lot of things also on the emerging technologies to bring together industry, government, and also cities to ensure here to have here the right things. Coming to my last point, the trust. It is quite important, as I just mentioned, that citizens have trust in the systems. So therefore, it is quite important to have also here an independent evaluation on architectures, on the security measures, really to ensure to have state-of-the-art implementations and ensure to have the right and secure systems in place.
I think indeed, I think the topic of security standards, I think is critical also in the way how cities will be designed in future and how you can really have all the vehicle to infrastructure communication. I think that's something which will be critical. Yeah. Very good.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. So I'll move on for the first statement to Christian. You, as you said, I think your business is simulating the city of the future in very different areas of the world, in very different geographies. And you've seen also the benefit that obviously mobility can have for cities. So how do you see those things interplaying?
Absolutely. So thank you very much for the very kind intro, Nikki. Just for the audience, you probably don't know PTV Group, but let me just tell you quickly what we do. We're a software company, and we really build two kinds of software. The first part focuses on mobility. So we build modeling and simulation software that enables traffic planners and infrastructure planners to take the right decisions, in virtual twins, for example. So where do we build the next road? Where do we build a bike lane? Where do we close part of the roads down for cars in cities? Stuff like that, for example. And the other part of our software focuses on what we call transportation, and that has a lot to do with route planning and route optimization. And also that is very important in an urban context. Just think about last mile, for example. So coming back to your question, Nikki, we talk to a lot of cities around the globe. More than 2,500 cities are using our software for modeling and simulation, and Shann Singapore is one of our customers. Thank you very much. And as we talk to those cities, I think there are 4 points that really stand out whenever we talk to them and whenever they are thinking about rebuilding infrastructure or building up a new mobility ecosystem. Number one is sustainability. We see that, I think every stand talks about sustainability at IAA, and I think everyone understands mobility is a fantastic tool to reduce CO2. The thing I learned, and we learned as a company, though, is that whenever we think about new mobility ecosystems, let's think about the very traditional ways of being mobile, for example, walking and biking as well, because they will continue to be a vital part of mobility ecosystems and urban infrastructure in the future. Number two is inclusivity. So, independent of age, income, or place of living, for example, people need to be included. So not everyone will be able to use a VTOL. Not everyone will be able to afford a VTOL, for example. Not everyone will be able to walk 15 minutes because you might be too old or you might be disabled. So it's absolutely key whenever we rethink mobility ecosystems and urban infrastructure that we take that into account. Number three is availability. So you talked about the outskirts or rural zones. I think that's going to be a key part because we all know cities have become very expensive. So a lot of people move outside the city and they obviously need to get to work in the morning and back home in the evening. So let's make sure that is going to happen, and public transport and a great multimodality mix will play a very important role here. And that's really it from my perspective. I think there are two last aspects I would like to add. The first one is it's a prerequisite, really. This will only work if the private and the public sector will join forces. Otherwise, that's never going to happen. And number two is it's a transformation process. And it's a pretty big transformation process because it includes infrastructure for the obvious reasons, and it includes thinking as well. So I think it's, Steffen's job, your job, my job, everyone's job to help cities and specifically public authorities to get a master plan really for this transformation process, because every transformation process can only be successful if you have a plan on which you can execute. So I think that's going to be key prerequisites for the future.
Well, thank you, Christian. And I think what you described in terms of this big master plan of transformation, I think becomes even more important when you take brownfield cities that evolve, but obviously also if you inject new transport modes as we have simulated, with autonomous shuttles or taxis or pods. So, Steffen, you are in the business of creating this infrastructure, and also this transport needs to be connected somewhere. So what's your perspective on this urban mobility in the smart city of the future?
So I'm also an architect, so we are looking on each thing which is visible. What we create will be there for the next 20, 50 or maybe 100 years. So therefore we're talking about a smart city, and even mobility is visible. If you look on a normal city, then they are orientated on individual mobility, and that means more or less cars, first of all. But if we remember lovely cities, for example in Switzerland, there comes the public transport first. Of course, it's not the only aspect that they are lovely, but then going further in Denmark, there's bike and the pedestrians with high priority. And I think this shows that we need a clear mobility strategy for the whole city and for each city. And as Christian mentioned, that couldn't be solved by the city or from public side or by the private side. Only if we join forces, we can change this situation we actually have. And public transport and individual transport, they are no enemies. They belong together, and there we need clear solutions. So therefore we see upcoming a new asset class as mobility hubs. What is a mobility hub? There we switch from individual to public transport, but from individual to individual as well. For example, I will come there with my bike, switch over to a bus. Come there by a bus and going down or leaving with the train. So Then we think about the building there, the mobility hub. Maybe there we can create co-working. There's a shopping area inside. So it's a really new building category, which we'll see in the upcoming years. But we have also to think about new forms of mobility, autonomous driving. Shann shown us that before in his presentation. We have to think on the third dimension in the city. For example, cable cars in the inner city. We have to think about flying cars and taxis. And we should not forget only thinking about mobility of people. We have also to think about the logistics in the city. Shann, you've shown that also in your slides. The logistic is one of the main aspects we have to solve as well. There we're thinking on, for example, also in the third dimension, not in the air, but maybe in the underground. There are some ongoing projects in the US, Switzerland as well, for example, a cargo souterrain, where we have underground pipes, not thinking about trains, but thinking smaller pipes where we can push through the delivery, not only by night, but 24 hours, 7 days. And I think if we have to focus on the public and the private side, on individual and on public transport, and we join forces, that's the only solution we can get better mobility and therefore better city in the future.
Excellent, and I think I have a follow-up question later on the public-private cooperation, because I think that is one of the unlocks to make that happen. Now, over to you, Andreas. You have been, there are 2 points I wanted to pick up. One was actually Christian's point, talking about mobility and inclusivity. I think we both have been looking at this topic, and I know it's very close to your heart. So if I may ask a little bit a double question. One is obviously, what is your overall perspective of end consumers on autonomous mobility? And I mentioned also to Silke the fear that many people have for autonomous mobility. And the second one is, what do you see with regard to inclusivity? Not stealing the show of tomorrow's panel, but maybe if you can give a sneak preview, that would be...
Yes, happy to do so, Nikki. In all our empirical investigations, we still see a lot of concerns rolling around when we talk about autonomous mobility, multimodal mobility. And that's no surprise, because mobility behavior is deeply learned, mobility habits are well established, and there was no need in the last decades to make substantial changes. So when we talk about autonomous driving, multimodal transportation, people are hesitant. And so the answer to all those questions is, in my view, use cases. Okay, we need to create field experiments, basically. We need to rebuild cities. We need to expose people to these new modes of transportation. We need to create showcases, and the idea would be to rebuild a city in Germany. And to bring in all these new modes of transport, all this new technology you were talking about, and then let people go, let they experience, give them a groundwork, a ground field to engage with all these wonderful technologies. And by doing this, I think we have, I'm coming to the second question, we would have a wonderful side effect. We need to bear in mind that 7, 8, 9%, up to 30% in some countries of people are excluded from mobility, because the way we organize mobility today excludes a lot of, for example, disabled people. And autonomous driving, for example, multimodal transportation concept would increase the reach of those people, would bring them back into social life, would offer new job opportunities, and I think we definitely should strive for this.
Yeah, very, I think, highly relevant. And especially if you look at how many jobs someone can reach with the current mobility, and with an optimized mobility, there is a factor of 2x in some cities, which I think is absolutely amazing. So let me turn to Vishan. You have shared with us the perspective of Singapore, but let me maybe profit of your practical experience and really address what Silke and Andreas also mentioned, which is the concern of the end users to get in these autonomous vehicles. What did you do in Singapore to make autonomous vehicles popular, to make people less concerned to board these vehicles?
Thank you. Well, first of all, we share that the enablers like public acceptability is key, right? Beside getting the technology right, to help people get on to autonomous vehicles and not wait for the other next bus that is manned is crucial for us. And so what we have done is that when we embark on the different individual trials and all those, we seize every opportunity to share with our people what autonomous vehicles as a public transport, shared transport is like. So you invite the different groups to come and look, take the autonomous vehicles, and to understand what this is about. But I think there's also a quarter who are quite fearful that whether autonomous vehicles will be able to address my needs. When you talk about public transport, there are always incidents that the bus captain will have to address. Sometimes people are not feeling well. Sometimes they need to seek help to even board the bus. So what are some of the areas that we can, assure the commuters that their interests are taken care of? And for us, looking at a system-wide, compromises such as security glitches is going to be a big drawback. And so as we design the autonomous vehicle system, when we look at the land transport system as a whole, we are very mindful that safe and secure journey is always a basic hygiene that we need to meet. Mm-hmm. So, we are still learning, and I'm benefiting from the panel discussion here as well. But these are little areas that we keep working on, and we think that over time, with larger and larger deployment, we get to learn what will be an optimal kind of service delivery to our people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much, Vishan, and I think there's a mutual learning that can happen with regard to this. So, as we are coming towards the end of our session, I wanted to do a little exercise to bring us all up to speed before we stop. And I'll start with Andreas. But I think I would like to ask a question. If you had a wish to public or private decision makers on how to push autonomous mobility in the city of the future, or how to improve mobility in the future, what would be your wish? And I would ask this to everyone in terms of what would be the key wish towards a better urban mobility, likely autonomous, but also otherwise. So maybe Andreas, if you could start, and then I'll go the other way around. And I'll close with Vishan.
If I was in charge of politics in Germany, I would pick one city, medium-sized city, 50,000 people, 100,000 people, and would start rebuilding this city from the scratch. And just create a field for experiencing all new types of new mobility. And by doing this, we would definitely attract new startups, new tech companies, so we would create an ecosystem of new mobility. I think it's time for action. I think it's time for implementing these ideas.
Very good. Steffen?
Yeah, I think Andreas already mentioned it's time for push, and this is missing at the moment. I think we have a lot of good solutions, but we need, in German cities, we need 20 or 30 years only to get that over the regulations ready about thinking. I think maybe it's a little bit easier in Singapore and other countries we are working as well, but in Germany to get the earth which is needed, to get the approval for the planning, we are taking too many years about that, and we need that for, maybe it's a solution to have that in one city, and then the others will follow. But I think it's not what we are seeing at the moment. We have a switch from public to private, and I think this is also the wrong solution. If we are going in new areas, in a new quarter, then the city tells the private investor, just show me the solution for the mobility. And I think the city is in charge of the future of the mobility in the city. And this is the wrong way where we see the switch at the moment. Only together, as I said before, and more push, this would be the solution.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, so I agree with you. The cities need to be the orchestrator of the whole thing. And my wish would be, first, let's really strengthen the cooperation between the public and the private sector. Number two would be bold and be open and be pragmatic. Don't think too much about it, just do it and execute. And let's start with efficiency. Just to give you one example, if you look at Hamburg, for example, which is very well advanced in terms of digitalization and thinking about new mobility, etc., it still takes you 2.24 times longer with the bus and the train to get into the city than with a private car. So let's start there. Let's improve efficiency with the right multimodality mix, and let's openly work together. That would be my wish.
Thank you. Silke.
Yeah, from my side, first, we need to act. From the second point I want to address is we need to think digital, so we really need to take the advantages out of the new mobility as much as possible. I would recommend to start with certain proof of concepts, really to start a little bit smaller and then extend it. And definitely start with cybersecurity from the beginning and extend it to the appropriate level once you have a full-blown system in place.
Great. And last but not least, Vishan, what's your wish?
Well, thank you. I think from Singapore government standpoint, we have shared our Land Transport Master Plan 2040, and hopefully that is the base kind of a map or roadmap as to what we hope to achieve in 20 years' time. But we are very mindful that we need to work very closely with the industry as well as the union to make many of these happen. And so with joint or co-innovations will this take root. This applies to autonomous vehicles, but actually applies to many areas in land transport.
Good. Well, thank you very much. I see that our next project is building the pilot city of mobility in Germany. I have a great team here that is able and ready and willing to do that with support from Vishan from Singapore. I thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you had an interesting discussion. Thank you very much. Thanks.